And so it's 5:59, so we'll start in a minute. Thank you.
I'm doing well.
All right, well, it's 6 o'clock, so I think we will go ahead and start our meeting. Are we good in the back? Okay, wonderful. So before we call the meeting to order, we will have a prayer from Councilman Spencer, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us pray. Oh, Heavenly Father, we stand in a posture of open-handedness, ready to receive more than we deserve. We are blessed by your gifts of faith, forgiveness, grace, repentance, hope, and love. And I pray that we use these gifts as you intended to draw us closer to you, God, the God in three persons, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Yesterday we celebrated a brother who walked in your spirit, a man who was called to not only serve his people, but for all of mankind. He understood that the chains of oppression are colorblind. He understood that our nation must aspire to live to its foundational principles of one nation under God with liberty and justice for all. I pray for our nation that we become a people that repents of our sins. We receive your gift of everlasting life, and we respond with changed hearts with the understanding that all things good come from you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone. I will now call to order the Tuesday, January 17th, 2023 City Council meeting, and you can join virtually. The agenda and link are at jeffersoncitymo.gov, along with the call-in participation number. Mrs. Donaldson, roll call, please.
Deacon,
Here.
Fitzwater,
Present.
Hensley,
Present.
Kimna,
Here.
Lester,
Here.
Schreiber,
Present.
Spencer,
Here.
Spicer, Ward,
Here.
Wiseman.
Present.
Item 3, a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item 4, we have no miscellaneous agenda items. Item 5, public hearings, Bill 2293.
An ordinance amending the code of the city of Jefferson, Missouri pertaining to transit system fares.
Mr. Marash.
Thank you. And besides myself, we have Jerry Stegman, our interim transit director here, as well as Katrina Williams, who helped with many things in transit, but one of which particularly was the public input process for this. So basically what this bill would do is increase the transit fares by approximately 50%, or at 50%. So in other words, simply put, what's a ride for $1 now would go to $1.50. And there's a whole list of fares in your packet that you can look at, but each one of them are built off that dollar fare, basically. The estimated revenue that we anticipate bringing in by this increase would be about $60,000. It's typically not a straight line when you do these fare increases, but over time, it probably will build back up. Last fare change was in 2007, and I believe at that time it went from 50 cents to $1, so it was like a 100% increase at that time. Fares are obviously paid by the users of the system, which then those user fees are part of our revenue in transit, and they offset the general fund input into the system. We've made the effective date of this, should it pass, to be February 6th, just to give folks time to adjust and let us also advertise that it's going into effect. We'll have to change some brochures and things like that. We probably won't have that done by the 6th, but we can certainly let people know what's going on. The one thing that is on the horizon, which our Transit Committee indicated they would support this, especially if we had some type of an app so people could pay electronically. And so we got a preview of that at last Thursday's Public Works and Planning Committee meeting from, I believe Jerry did that for us. But our payment app would be called Token Transit. And certainly once if these fares are updated, we'll get those in there. But this should be ready for rollout, I'm assuming within about a month or so. And then as far as the public input process, like I said, Katrina was really the guru of that, but she held 2 open houses, had an electronic survey, and of course this hearing's another input process. And then mail-in, we have a recent mail-in copy from, I believe, over the weekend or the long weekend, and so we laid a copy of that on everyone's desk. So I think everybody has all the input that has been received over about this over the last month or so. And be happy to answer any questions, or if anything that I don't know, I'd certainly call on the other staff members.
Councilman Deacon?
Approximately what percent are we going to be charged back for using the app? That's
Uh,
the first question. And then number 2, the approximate revenue we get per year through the meters without the app?
I believe it's a dime a transaction, or 10%.
10%.
So if it stays $1, it'd be a dime, but if it goes $1.50, it'd be 15 cents if you're, for the convenience of that. What was the other question about the fare box,
Revenue.
what the fare box is now? I don't have the number right in front of me, but I am recalling it's around, depending on how you look at it, about 300,000. Anyone else? That's a good ballpark figure Jerry's telling me. So now that includes a lot of different things. And so sometimes with fares, if they do increase, there may be some folks maybe start combining trips more often to accommodate that fare increase, just on their personal finances. They may do a little of that. They may not use the system or look for more rides from, say, family members or friends, things like that, especially initially until they kind of get used to the number. And then you'll gradually start coming back. So that's why we estimate it a little conservatively. Don't want to overpromise that number.
So in essence, it'll cost us $30,000 a year, approximately. If we got 300,000, 10%.
Well,
30,000.
not everybody will use it's
I
just
mean,
yeah, if
that
everybody
was-
did. If everybody did, I suppose that would be right, but it's just an option. You don't have to do that.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councilman Spencer?
Yes. Is this a contract or is it just a monthly fee? How are we going to set that up?
I don't recall exactly. Let's see, Jerry, do you know? We would have to contract with them, but we can shut it off fairly easy if it isn't working out.
Okay. Thank you.
Because they just to follow up, we've already started looking at, what bank account information they need, things like that, and finances is helping us with that.
Councilwoman Ward?
Regarding the fee schedule we have here in our packet, there's a reduced fare fee. It looks like it's not going up 50%, it's going up 25. It's 50 cents to 75 cents. How does that reduced fee program work? Do individuals submit an application?
Jerry, you can.
The reduced fare-
You gotta speak into here, but. Yeah, it's still going up 50% because it's 50 cents now and it go to 75.
75, okay.
So it's 50% increase, but it's only a quarter because of the reduced.
The reduced fare is for people with disabilities or people over, well, in Jeff City, it's people over 60 years of age, stuff like that. They have to apply for a reduced fare card. The card's free, but it entitles them for half fare. And that's a mandate by the FTA that you have to offer a reduced fare. So it's half of the amount of what you charge for a regular bus ride.
Is it based on income also?
No, it's
Or-
not based on income. It's just based on disability, veterans with disability, age, certain criteria like that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before we open the hearing? Councilman Fitzwater?
Yeah, I was just going to make a comment. I see Ms. Hirsch here, and I appreciate the work that your commission has done in working with us. I know we've had dialogue over the last year or so on transit, on a broad base of issues. So first, thank you. Yeah, I've learned a lot in that discussion, and I appreciate the open dialogue. Councilman Spencer and I had an opportunity to attend a meeting today. I think we've got some opportunities and kind of that philosophy of everything's on the table. Let's talk about things. Let's do what's right for this community. So I appreciate our Transit Commission working with us, and I mean, I think we're going to move this thing forward. I know there's concerns as we go through budget, but we've worked through those things, and I appreciate you working with us, and we'll continue to do that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other comments? All right, with that, we will open the public hearing portion. And is there anyone here that would like to speak on Bill 2293? And I know we have Mrs. Hirsch signed up mainly for informational purposes. So if there are any specific questions, did you have anything you wanted to add at this time?
Not unless there are any questions for the committee.
Okay, and again, we appreciate that. I know this recommendation came from the committee, and we appreciate all the members' hard work on that. Anyone else here to speak on 2293? All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing portion and take up Bill 2293. Any further council discussion, deliberation? Councilman Lester?
Yeah, I'm just concerned about this. It's, for me, weighing the amount of money that is going to increase, 60,000, it's not going to do much for the finances of transit, which is 2.8 million. Weighing that against loss of ridership, it just concerns me. I really don't think I'll be for this proposal. I mean, at this time, to me, we should be doing everything we can to increase ridership rather than doing something that is going to decrease it. This population that uses transit, they use it for getting to work and for medical appointments and shopping. And they're a group that probably can least afford any additional expenses, as the survey pointed out, and why there will be less ridership from this. So I think I'm going to be voting against it.
Councilman Deacon?
I have to agree with Councilman Lester. I think it's rather disingenuous. We go out of our way to pound on our chest and say we want to help the poor, but when we get a chance, give them free rides. No, we can't do that. But now the people that truly use the service, probably a good 75 to 80% use it because they don't have the means to have and maintain a vehicle. We're going to say, yeah, we're just going to raise your rate. So we do it on the sly. We're not going to tell anybody, pound our chest on this one, but I can't vote for it. I would, for $60,000, I would love to see us redo our routes or have less routes and go free. Truly have a service for the people. I mean, back years ago, kids rode it, and a lot of adults rode it, but those times are changed. And the way our town is set up, we are not on a grid system. We don't have a centralized business system. Transit's never really going to work. I would like to see redo the whole system, have other people look at it, and but I can't vote for a fare increase now, especially for the people that truly need it. If you drive around town, especially those, if you come over on the East End and see how it really is, there's people everywhere with the shopping carts. They're not going to riding to work. They're riding to the doctor, or to the grocery store, or just picking up groceries at Samaritan Center. I can't vote for it.
Thank you. And Councilman Deacon, just to clarify, just the comment about that we didn't tell anyone about it that you mentioned, I do want to clarify that, I mean, it was introduced at the last meeting, but that there was the public hearing or the open comment process was open. I know that Mr. Marash sent out an email that kind of listed some of the timeline as well, so I just wouldn't want people to think that it was just coming out tonight. So, okay. Any other comments? All right, because we've been welcoming public input for a little while, which is what we have in front of us. Anything else? If not, we will take up 2293. Roll call, please.
Deacon,
No?
Fitzwater,
Aye.
Hensley,
Aye.
Kimna,
No.
Lester,
No.
Schreiber,
Aye.
Spencer,
Aye.
Spicer, Ward,
Aye.
Wiseman. Can you say your vote again, please?
Aye.
Aye.
Sorry.
6 ayes. Bill passes.
Okay, bill passes. Item 6, appointments by the mayor. Mrs. Strope.
Thank you. We have 3 reappointments to the Police Personnel Board this evening. Those are Pete Fleischman, Troy Pinkerton, and Stacy Backus. And I would like to point out that Stacy Backus, this is a 3rd full term, so it will require 2/3 majority approval of the council. And then to the Public Transit Advisory Committee, we have 2 reappointments, Angela Hirsch and Joshua Hale, and then 1 new appointment, and that's Anjali Dixon.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. As always, we appreciate our board and commission members and always welcome people to apply. Now, the next item we have is our salary study, which is going to be pretty in-depth conversation. I know before I had mentioned under item 10 that we would take up Mr. Mel Kalal's comment under 10 later. He's the only one signed up, so would we want to just do that now? Any objection to having Mel come now before the discussion? If we did, okay. Let's do, and maybe we ought to do that, and then maybe Lincoln University in case Octavia has homework tonight, although this will be a great discussion. So why don't we have you come forward, Mr. Kalal, if you'd like to give us your commentary, and then we will dig into the salary study. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Let me see, when I only was here 2 years ago, I had to restretch this thing. They got us now. I have 2 topics tonight. One that's a little smaller than the other. The first thing I want to say is that I have been in touch with MoDOT. I agree with the city's position on the proposals that they have for the, I call it the 54 and the 63 intersection study. I don't trust MoDOT to make the right decision, but I do trust the city to do that. I had a good meeting with Mr. Bangy this afternoon, and I'll leave it up to the city to go forward with that. There's some things that need to be done, but I think they're offering to spend an awful lot of our taxpayers' money, and they could be done better. So I just want to mention that. The second thing, which I did not mention to the mayor, I sent a note to David. I believe the comment in the paper was that I think, and I stand corrected, on the meters that are proposed for electronic changes, the city is only going to get about 20 or 25% of the revenue, as I understand it, and that I think is totally inadequate. If we can't split 50-50 with the firms doing the software, then we shouldn't do it at all, because right now we get 100% of it, and they aren't getting anything. And these software companies are, once they get your fingers into you, they will change their rates, they will change their terms, they will change the contract almost without notice. So I just want to stand against moving forward with something that's going to pay so little to the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kalal. Any questions? All right. Thank you for being here.
Okay.
And you're welcome to stay as long as you would like. And now we will have our Lincoln University student representative update from Octavia. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Turgeon. Good evening, councilman, and good evening, guests. I would like to first start off by wishing everyone a happy new year. I'm very excited to be back here. Today was actually the first day of our spring semester, and this is Welcome Week. It's filled with many events and activities to welcome our new and returning students back to campus. If anyone is interested, the farmers market will be held Saturday, January the 21st, which is this Saturday. The LU Winter/Spring Indoor Farmers Market is held the first and third Saturday of the month from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. at 900 Leslie Boulevard, Suite B, Lorenzo Green Hall. Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated is still collecting new or gently used coats of all sizes from now until January 23rd, and these will be distributed on January the 25th. The collection sites are Cool Runnings at 226 East Dunklin Street and Dawson Learning Center, Dawson Hall at Lincoln University, 711 Lee Drive. Lincoln University would like to invite everyone to our Founders Day Convocation. Founders Day celebrates Lincoln's years of education service. This will be held on February 9th from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. at Mitchell Auditorium, Richardson Fine Arts Center. And lastly, Lincoln's birthday observance is on February 10th. And that concludes all of the announcements for Lincoln University. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome back from break, and glad to have you here, and a lot of good activities coming up. Any questions from council? Okay. And I do want to make sure I'm not forgetting anyone that wouldn't be able to stay for the meeting. I do note that Mr. Heath Garvin from Scholastic is also with us, who came after we went through the pre-meeting, and your item is under bills introduced, under item 99. And I know it's just introduced, so there wouldn't be any action taken in case you have to leave before the meeting's over. I wanted council to know that you were here for that bill. So, okay, so with that, Councilman, I'm sorry, Spencer? Sorry.
Said it, didn't you?
Almost.
A little bit of reversal there, because it's generally the other way around. But
Yes.
if I could ask for a little leniency on the agenda tonight, we have the Browns here, and I just thought we might give them an opportunity to speak about the recent historic foot district that the council passed. I believe it was a couple meetings ago, or last meeting, can't remember. But I think Mr. Brown might just want to have a few comments. I think from our perspective, if you don't, that's fine.
May I sit here real quick?
We will.
We can take the microphone over there,
We'll
though.
bring you the microphone.
But it was a collaboration of city staff and his commitment and passion for that area of our community. And I just publicly want to say thank you for all your hard work and effort in that. So.
Well, I want to give a heartfelt thanks to the council for giving a tool to make it possible to have a historic district. I'd like to thank the city staff, from Ms. Sensei and her staff. I'd like to thank Mr. Moman and his staff. I'd like to give a special thanks to Ms. Ward, because she was my inspiration. I think that Jefferson City demonstrated an attitude that I remember as a young man, and as I've grown older now, I just had my 70th birthday, and it's a good feeling to be able to see a city work together to come up with an idea that is so unique that it's the only one in the United States. I want to let everyone know that I've been getting calls. I got a call from a Professor Ward from WashU in St. Louis. He's interested in how we did this, what can they do in their Afro-American studies to help other communities to overcome this kind of a situation. And I'd like to thank my brother for being by my side. And I'd like to thank all of you for the prayers, for my continued health improvement. I'm not going to give up, and I'm not going to give in.
And I want to say one last thing, and I'll just put it this way. Last week I was asked, Glover, why are you so interested in economic development? At your age, 50, 60, you should leave this to the young people. And I kind of looked around and I thought to myself, you know what? And I tell and challenge everyone in Jefferson City, I don't care how old you are, if you still have a vision for the city, don't think that you're too old to participate. And I want to leave you with this one last thought, as I told Councilman Spencer. My motto is this: it's a wise man that plants a tree that he will never see grow. And so that's how I have been able to operate. And thank you all for giving me this opportunity, and God bless all of you.
Thank you for those comments and for being here. And that's right, you were unable to be here the night that we passed this, so it's nice to have you all here. Thank you for your involvement and doing something that will be the first of its kind really in the country, with this sort of district being formed and hopefully modeled by many more to come.
May I say one more thing? Already,
Sure.
we are now in talks for some economic development, community development in that area already.
Well, that is great news. So we'll keep that going. Thank you. So now we will move on to item 7, presentations from the Evergreen study. Mr. Kroll.
I'd like to introduce Mark Holcomb with Evergreen Solutions to give an overview and a presentation on the compensation study that he conducted for the city.
Welcome.
Thank you all so much for having me. My name is Mark Holcomb. Good evening, and I appreciate the opportunity that I'm going to have today to walk you through the compensation study, really from beginning to end. I appreciate everybody's patience, because I know we've already alluded to it a couple times that it may be a little bit of a lengthy process. I'll try to go through the presentation, as quickly as I can while still covering all details. But if anybody here has any questions, thoughts, concerns, if you want to stop me as I go through with questions, I'm happy for you to do so. Or if we'd like to hold the questions till the end, I'm happy to answer them at the end as well. Let me see. Okay. So I'm going to start off with the presentation going over some of the study goals and the project phases. That will be a little bit of a recap. I know I had an associate who was able to present in my absence several months ago, just to walk through the beginning of the study, the steps that we had taken at that point, and where we were as sort of a status update. That'll be a little bit of recap, but I know it's been a while, so I thought it was worth our time to go through that again, to remind everybody what we did to get to this point as we start talking about results and recommendations. We will talk about some of the current system findings, and those are just going to be a couple highlights from the current system findings that... are we still able to see? Okay, there we go. Those will just be some highlights on the current system findings that are relevant to the recommendations that we're going to have. So we'll talk a little bit about what are some of the things that we identified and that we saw that we wanted to make recommendations on. So just as a reminder there, we will talk about a market summary. So that market summary will go over what did we hear in the market, what did we learn, what did we see when we looked at your peers versus your compensation practices. And then those next steps will really be our recommendations for the next steps that the city can take, and sort of asking you all for your direction in terms of us being able to work with your city's leadership team, your city staff leadership team to implement the results of the study. So the study goals for a compensation study like this really are twofold. And so looking at your compensation system to ensure internal equity is one of the goals that we have. And so with that internal equity review, we want to look at individuals, where they're placed inside your compensation system. We want to look at positions. We want to make sure that positions that are performing work that would be comparable to others, and maybe in 2 different departments, if you have 2 different employees who are performing similar work and who have similar credentials, they would be able to be compensated in a similar manner. Of course, that doesn't mean that every single person with the same job title would make the same amount of salary take home. Sometimes you'll have somebody with some additional education, some additional experience. Maybe someone will be a high performer. Maybe somebody started at the city long ago, and maybe somebody else just came into the role, last year. But we do want to make sure that the levels of compensation available for work are equitable across the board. The other bullet, which is what I think everybody probably thinks of with a compensation study, is surveying for external equity. So ensuring that you're market competitive in the rates that you're offering, and that your positions have pay scales that do meet the expectations of employees or potential employees in the market in which you compete. So the recommendations that we've made that we'll share with you tonight really do try to keep both of those factors in mind throughout each of the recommendations, because we do want to ensure that you are market competitive, but it's not as simple as just taking the market results and copy pasting into your new pay scale. We do have to look at the way you've administered compensation in the past. We do have to look at those internal relationships between positions. And so really both of those factors, the internal and the external, are important with our recommendations. The project phases from beginning to end, we do divide up the project at a high level into 4 different phases. Phase 1 is the outreach phase, where we collect data, we speak with your county project team over here, really try to understand how you're administering compensation right now. Some of that data we collected from HR included org charts, job descriptions, compensation information on individuals and on positions, and really trying to make sure we collected and understood everything that you all are doing currently. Once we have that data, once we have the data from your organization, we move into phase 2, which is the internal analysis. So the first thing that we do is start reviewing the data, start asking questions. If we see, hey, we're missing a piece of data here that we had asked for, we ask, why are we missing it? Do we have anything to replace that data? We run something called the assessment of current conditions, and the assessment of current conditions is essentially an analysis that we run to look at your pay scales to try to identify anywhere you deviate from best practice, including where you might have some compression in your pay scales or between employees here. And so we do have something to share there with the internal analysis. We'll share a little bit of the results in a moment. But phase 3 then, so after we've done the internal analysis, after we look at how your pay scales are being administered currently, we compare those to the market, and we say, how do other people in your same competitive market administer compensation? Are your rates higher? Are your rates lower? Are they about the same? Do you see any major differences in structure and form, between your city and the market in which you're competing? And so once we have those answers to the internal analysis and the external analysis, we come forward with our recommendations and reporting. So we do have a number of implementation options that we've discussed, that we've gone back and forth with HR and made sure we explain the pros and the cons of each option. We do have some recommendations to present at the end of the presentation today as far as what we believe would best address the needs of the city. The reporting piece includes this presentation tonight, but it also includes a written report that I know was shared, I believe, with this council at some point last week. And so again, that is a more detailed report than we'll have time to go through today, but it does go through in a step-by-step basis each of the different phases of the project that got us to this point today.
Councilman Fitzwater?
Just a question. Phase 2 just compares salary, not benefits, or the entire package?
So it does look at salaries. The assessment of current conditions is primarily focused on salaries between employees and positions.
Thank you.
So with the current system findings, as I discussed earlier, we do have a little bit to share with you in terms of some of the strengths that you all have, as well as some of the weaknesses that we had identified that, hey, we may want to take a look at this and at least want to make the city aware of those couple items in the weaknesses category there. One of the strengths, your current pay scale, it is simple, uniform, easy to understand. Some organizations, pay scales can get pretty complex where you look at them and you really might not even be able to determine where a position is supposed to fit in it, how an employee is supposed to move through it. And so you have done a good job with that current pay system that you have, not speaking about its market competitiveness at all, but again, the overall structure of employee pay between minimum and maximum. It is a simple and straightforward system. The average tenure by quartile does increase throughout the pay scales, and so what that means is, in general, you do show a history of increasing employees from the minimum to the maximum of the ranges. that does show a certain level of increase, throughout time. So if an employee starts at the minimum of the scale now, they would not expect to be at the minimum of the scale in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. They would expect to move to that midpoint and above by looking at the data here. So again, that does show a history of advancing employees through the scales. Does not discuss whether or not you've advanced at a market competitive rate, but it does show, again, that there is some level of advancement, and we will talk about the rate of advancement when we get to the market slides in a moment. With some of the weaknesses that we did identify, and really probably identifying them as weaknesses or areas of concern is a good way to phrase those, because number one, you do have more than 85% of employees below the midpoint, so that can indicate significant turnover, new hires, or can potentially indicate some compression across the pay scales. A lot of those employees below the midpoint should be below the midpoint. If you look at somebody who is a new hire without much experience on the outside, you would expect that person to be hired close to the minimum. So I don't want you to see that 85% and think all 85% are wrong or shouldn't be there or are experiencing some compression, but that is a high number. We typically don't see a number quite that high when we look at other organizations. So you would think above and below midpoint might be relatively close to 50% above and below. Most organizations, it's really about 55% or maybe 60. So again, we did want to indicate that at least to make you all aware of that imbalance there. And then we did identify some compression as well. Not the most significant compression we've seen, but certainly I think this exhibit here on the next page does highlight some of the compression concern that we did find. So on this exhibit here, I know it's a lot of colors, but the key colors to look at here are those orange and blue colors at the bottom of the scale. So as you move from left to right on this graph here, the columns on the left-hand side represent your brand new employees, so employees with less than 1 year of tenure, and then each bar is an increasing year of tenure. So as you move to the right, you'll see your employees who have been at the organization for 20, 25, 30 years. And what you will notice is that there is a lot more orange and blue to the right-hand side of the scale than there is at the left. That indicates that employees are experiencing at least a little bit of compression as they have stayed in the organization over time. Now, again, as we didn't look at historical data and we did not look at your pay scale increases over the last 30 years, we can't diagnose exactly why that's happening. We didn't look at the history to that level to diagnose that. But what we do see is, again, over the first 5, 6, 7 years, it does appear that you've done at least a relatively good job of addressing that compression over the past few years. But of those employees who have been at the organization for 8+ years, you see some of those categories there does have 20, 30% of employees in each pay scale experiencing at least some compression with where they would expect to be in their pay scale. So getting to the market comparisons as opposed to the internal comparisons that we've talked about thus far, we do have a summary of the responses that we did receive from 15 different organizations. Each of those organizations that provided data was adjusted for cost of living because understanding that across the state you are going to see slightly different levels of cost of living depending on where your point of comparison is. We will show the effect that the cost of living adjustment had, I believe, on the next slide, so you'll be able to see exactly how much that impacted things. We did look at 82 different positions specifically and directly versus the market, so it is important to know we did use a benchmarking methodology. And so what that means is we didn't look at every single position in the organization, but of those 82 positions, we did have classifications that would represent all departments and all areas of the pay scale. So entry-level employees, mid-level, managers, directors, all the way from the bottom to the top of the organization. We did receive an average response rate of more than 7 matches per position. Again, that is a strong response rate that did allow us to, we believe, have robust findings to make recommendations about market position for those positions that we received responses on. Not every organization is going to have an exact match for every single position because every organization is a little bit different. And so if we found another organization operated in a different manner than you, if they had a position that was either the workload would have been split between 2 different departments or 2 different employees, if you all maybe had a manager in the position and they maybe had a supervisor or a coordinator fulfilling some of those same duties, those are examples of times when we would not have included a market match from those positions. So again, each of the positions that we did bring back market data from, each of the matches in there We use about a 75% overlap in duties before we'll consider it an adequate market match. So that's what's represented by those market matches there. So talking about the market results, we do have a couple different breakdowns of the results to share. So here on this first slide here, what we have is the market results if you look at the city as compared to the market average for pay, or the 50th percentile. So what this shows here, on the left-hand side, you see the unadjusted cost of living, unadjusted results that do not have a cost of living adjustment. You'll see that the city goes from about 1% behind the market average to about 1% above, from the minimum to the maximum of the pay scale. And so what that's going to show you is that you are relatively competitive. You are approximately where your peers are when looking at those 82 different positions. And an important note here as well is this is as of fall of last year. So this would not include changes that organizations are making now or made after about October of last year or have planned for this upcoming year as well. So we'll talk more about that when it gets to the recommendations. But to emphasize again, as of about fall of last year, you were very market competitive on average. This does represent the average result. So some positions did fall below the average. Some positions came in a little bit stronger, a little bit above the market average for pay. When you look at the adjusted results in the middle, you see it goes from about 0% to 1%. So again, not a significant adjustment for cost of living. That does show that across the board, the organizations that we looked at, again, on average, were relatively close to the city's cost of living. So no wide or dramatic swings across the state, but we did see adjustments again for each and every match that we brought back. The average actual salary comparison, so that last spot all the way on the right-hand side, that shows the actual take-home pay that employees receive. So on the other 6 boxes there, what you're looking at is the pay scales. So where it says minimum, that's the entry level pay for positions. Where it shows midpoint, that's what we would typically look at as about the market salary that you would expect a fully competent and fully proficient individual to receive. And at the maximum of the scale, again, that is the cap, the most that anybody would be able to make at an organization. But on the right-hand side, you see the average actual salary. That represents the actual dollars in people's paychecks every single week or month or over the course of the year. And so what that can show is sometimes organizations have very responsive salary ranges. But if you're not advancing your people through the pay scales, it might look like you're competitive at the minimum, midpoint, and maximum, but your actual salary paid may be well below the market. Alternatively, you can see the opposite. Some organizations have let their pay scales slide, but as long as they keep up with that actual salary paid, that can show that you've done something for that compensation. You're about right in line. And so what that shows is while you do have some compression that we talked about before, while you do have some employees who maybe haven't moved through the scales the way they would have expected, on average, you are doing about as well as the majority of your peers. And so again, that does put you right about at the average there. It does show that you haven't escaped all of the concerns necessarily with compression that some of your peers would be experiencing, but it also shows that you're certainly not doing worse than your peers as far as moving employees through your pay scales. The next market breakdown that we have here, and this is something we'll talk about in the recommendations, but again, this is the 70th percentile of the market. So this shows how you all compare above the market average. If you were to look and say, hey, we would like to compete above the average, we would like to be a destination employer, we would like to be able to recruit employees over and above what the average peer is paying, this shows that you're not quite there yet. At the current placement right now, again, as of fall of last year, you are about 8% to 6% behind without adjusting for cost of living, about 7 to 6% behind once you adjust for cost of living. And again, your actual salaries paid are about 6% below the 70th percentile of the market. So again, I do want to emphasize here, when we show those negative numbers, this does not mean that you're below your average peer, but it does mean that if the city wants to target a more advanced market position, if you all want to be able to say, we're going to compensate, we're going to recruit, we're going to try to retain employees who are above average, who are beyond what the average market peer would be able to pay, you are a few percentage points away from that right now. So that's what those differentials there are showing. So with the recommendations then, so a couple key recommendations to share, and then I'll have a couple slides going into some details on these recommendations. Either way, whether or not the city wants to target the market average pay, the market midpoint, or whether the city would like to go above and beyond and pay above that average, we do have 3 recommendations that will be applied slightly differently either way. So the first one is to adopt an adjusted pay plan with new grades added. We did maintain some of the strengths of your current pay scale. Again, tried to keep you in a very simple, structured, and consistent pay scale from bottom to top. But we did note that your pay scales didn't match all the way from the bottom of the market to the top of the market. You did have some areas where, again, you wouldn't have had a pay grade that would have been able to compensate an employee in a particular market placement. So that new pay scale is displayed in the draft report. And so you are able to see that it is in that report that we've shared, but it is a slightly adjusted scale, but it does have consistent spreads between positions and a consistent progression up the grade. So if you go from grade 105 to 106 or 106 to 107, it's the same distance percentage-wise between those grades throughout the scales. Recommendation number 2 is to reassign pay grades to positions based on internal equity and the market results. And so as you have new pay scales that we're recommending, you will have to find where do positions correlate from one pay scale to the next. Where should a position be compensated from one pay scale to the next? Some positions will receive, in these recommendations, a larger adjustment than other positions. That is based off of our review of, again, internal equity and the market. And so in particular, the positions that we saw, that we identified before, where I mentioned, hey, some positions were further below, some were further ahead. If a position was at market or above, in general, it would have stayed about at its same pay rate. So in general, positions would have stayed approximately equal. I think the default raise that, or not raise, excuse me, the default increase to positions pay scales that we gave to most positions was about 3 to 4%. And so again, that would move the pay scales up slightly to account for our perceived and projected market movement that we're going to see from employees. If you're above market, you still get a slight adjustment to your scale to make sure that you're not moving backward for the majority of positions. But if your position is 15% below the market, it doesn't help you to move by 4%. Of course, that's still going to keep you well below the market for your position. So we did have certain positions that moved further, and we did make those adjustments on an individual basis for each and every position in the organization. If a position was a benchmark position to the market, it was very simple and straightforward. We looked at the market rate that we returned, we looked at where the position needed to be slotted, and then we looked for internal equity to see, is this going to be okay or is this going to cause an inequity? If your position was not a benchmark position, instead what we did is looked at those benchmark positions that were similar in some manner and looked at what the market would have been telling us for that position. So we may have looked at a position that if a position was not a benchmark, we may have looked at a similar position that that employee supervises. So if your position that you supervises increases by 10%, you may need to move as well to maintain some space between that position that you supervise. If there's a similar position in another department that operates at a relatively similar level, we may have needed to move you to maintain that equity. Likewise, if we saw that, hey, your position, or excuse me, all positions in your department needed to move by a certain rate, we may have needed to move certain positions to maintain that department equity. So that was done on an individual basis throughout the pay scale. Option number 3, or recommendation number 3, is to place employees within those newly recommended pay scales. And so as an example, if you have an employee who's currently receiving a salary of $45,000, if their pay scale increases, but they're still within the pay scale, so even if their pay scale increased by 10%, do you need to adjust that employee's salary? There are a number of different ways that you can make adjustments to employee salaries, a number of different ways that we looked at, and the method that we're ultimately recommending for adjustment to employee salaries is the hybrid parity placement methodology. Now, we've got 2 of those up there because I did want to show the bring to minimum adjustment here. We do not recommend that, but the bring to minimum is essentially the minimum cost the city could incur if you would like to adopt the pay scales that we've recommended. So the bring to minimum approach, the only changes it makes is if we adopt the new pay scales and the new grade assignments for positions, any employees who fall below the minimum would be raised up to that new minimum. It does not address compression. It does not address the market with individual employees, although it does address the market with classifications, not with individual employees, and it can cause some additional compression. So if we group all the employees who are below minimum or near minimum, if we group them all at the minimum with a bring to minimum approach, that can increase the compression that you all have, which is why, again, we show that to show you the minimum cost, but the hybrid parity approach is what we're proposing, because that hybrid parity approach actually does adjust employees for the market and for the internal equity that they should have based on their time spent with the organization. And it places every employee at least the recommended placement amount with the city. So the hybrid that we're making here is actually a combination of an employee's time in position and time with the organization overall. We did take a look at both of those factors so that we don't penalize any employee. If you think about somebody who's been with the organization for 20 years and they promoted last week or last year, we don't want to penalize that employee as if they're a brand new employee. Likewise, if you had somebody who just promoted last year, and we don't want to give them 20 full years of credit in their new position because they may jump past some of the people who are already in that classification who just may not have been with the city quite as long. So we look at that hybrid methodology. We give partial credit for all the time that an employee has spent with the organization outside of their current classification, and we give full credit for time in classification. So that does a better job of essentially placing employees where they would need to be to address compression. With this methodology, what we're showing here is the implementation cost if the organization would like to match the market median or the market average or the market midpoint. So this would have you and place you essentially halfway through the market. You would be in the middle. There would be half of your peers below you, half of your peers above you. But what this would do is this would do a good job of putting employees into the proper placement within the ranges. So this would address compression. And it would allow the city to say that we've selected an implementation methodology that looks at internal equity as well as external equity. The market rates would be competitive with your average peer, and employees would be placed appropriately as such. If you look at the next slide, what you will see is the implementation cost at the 70th percent of the market. Now, the 70th percentile here, again, this would allow you to essentially rise above and beyond that average market peer. If you think about what's going on in the country right now, if you look at the the inflation people have experienced, the turnover organizations across the country are seeing, the recruiting and retention challenges that organizations are feeling right now, the 70th percentile approach here would be designed to put you above what some of your peers are experiencing here. You would be able, and you would have an advantage when recruiting employees in the job market, because we would be saying you're not just paying the market average, you're paying a little bit above, so that you're able to recruit those employees, again, who are slightly higher quality than what you would expect the average employee to be. Now, this will not solve every single problem you've ever had. It does not mean your turnover percent will go down to 0%. But what this would do, again, is give you an advantage, and it would allow you to hopefully rise above the concerns you see everybody else having in the market today. So it would give you that advantage as far as compensation and classification goes. So as these are the last couple of slides, I'll skip back real quick just to highlight the amounts there on the slides. The 50th percentile approach here would cost about $1 million when you look at general employees as well as fire employees. This is the total reoccurring salary only cost. And you can see there again the average increase about $4,000 per employee. If you look at the 70th percentile approach, it does have a higher price tag. It would be about 1.7, almost 1.8 million, about a $6,000 average increase. Again, for general employees as well as fire employees. And so those are the two options that we want to put before council tonight. I did try to speak to a little bit of the pros and cons of each option, but if anybody has any additional questions, I'd be more than happy to speak to the recommendations if council has anything to ask.
Councilman Spencer?
Yeah, I have some questions, so if I can have a little leniency with my progression here. Can you tell me when your firm submitted your initial draft?
The draft report. I do not know exactly. Are you referring to the written report?
Yes. The one that is in our was sent out last week.
I do not know off the top of my head. We've been working on the draft report again internally for a while, because when we go through that assessment of current conditions, that was started, I think, mid last year. So that particular chapter would have been dated to, I don't know, early summer of last year potentially. The market results, of course, wouldn't have been finalized. Chapter 3, I believe, the market results, that wouldn't have been finalized or shared or submitted at all until probably fall, in that time frame, October or so. And then the recommendations, again, would have been finished November, December. So probably no more than a month ago, I would imagine.
Okay.
The final, if I could though, the final report was sent out last week.
Yeah, so the final, right.
I sent that out as soon as I got it.
Correct. I took that as the
Shortly
draft that you were asking about. The
Yes.
final, you're correct. We did not finalize it until last week.
Well, and I guess that brings me to some concerns about the report.
Okay.
I sent an email to Mrs. Strope on 12/20 about the status of the report, and she said that you didn't have anything at that time. We are still hoping to have the report by the end of the year. I felt that was kind of misleading, quite frankly, based on some of the other information I've received that there has been versions sent.
Well, we had draft going back and forth, and frankly, there were corrections that were made to it.
Okay,
So, yeah.
but I guess that it would have been kind of nice to had maybe some full disclosure of the drafts of and why they were being resubmitted back to get updated or corrected or whatever. But beside the point, under market data exhibit 3C-1 on page 3-4 of the report, do you have a copy of that? Or-
Not in front of me, no.
Okay, all right. So you're probably going to have to be a bit of a handicap then.
Sure, I'm happy to look at you if you've got an extra copy.
That'd be great, actually. So, yes. It's page 3-4. And the table's 3C-1.
Okay.
Okay. Why wasn't part of the data, part of the table of what we are currently paying for those positions? And obviously, when we have more than one position, we could have maybe have an average salary, so that we can kind of compare that. And could you break that down, that table down for, like, let's say ID number 24, and then in comparison to ID number 31?
Okay, so
What is that actually saying?
Sure, absolutely. So to address the first question, I think you're asking about you're saying the average actual salaries versus the
Yeah, for
market
some of them,
ranges that are shown here?
Yeah, because some of those are specific one employee position,
Single incumbent positions, right, gotcha. Okay, so what we have here, what we're displaying, is this displays the compensation ranges that are available to positions in the market. And so when you mention job number 24, Director of Human Resources, that is a single incumbent position. But what we're displaying there is not representative of your particular salaries that you're offering. That shows what we return from the market. So that's the market average at the minimum, midpoint, and maximum of a position. So it doesn't reflect the actual pay that anybody receives. And one of the reasons we do, actually that's a specific reason why we do typically leave off the actual salary received, is in single incumbent positions, a little bit of a privacy thing. Obviously, it's public record. Somebody could go get the data, but again, just so as not to publish somebody's individual salary without that request, it is a little bit of a privacy thing. Even with multi-incumbent positions, again, we don't want to cause any concern or issues with employees who, if you look at another position on there that may have, bus driver that may have, multiple incumbents in that position. If somebody sees it and says, well, I'm below this average, why am I not making more? Again, just really for that privacy concern that we don't want to put that information out there unless the city would direct us to do so. So that's typically why we would leave that off. On this exhibit, what you'll see is on the left-hand side, the ID number, that's just a simple count just to show us what position. The classification, that's the name of the position, so it indicates which position we're looking at from the city. The survey minimum average, so that's the next column over. That shows us the average response that we received from your market peers. Now, the differential number, that shows how this number compares with what the city is currently paying. So for a position with a positive percent differential, that shows that the city's percentage there is currently your minimum of your salary range is currently higher than what the market shows. A negative differential shows that your position is currently paying below what the market has returned. That's the same exact information for the midpoint and the maximum, just obviously at different comparison points. So between those 6 lines there, the 3 averages and the 3 differentials, that shows how you compare with the market at the minimum, midpoint, and maximum. And then the differentials would show, again, are you above or below, and by how much. When you get to the right-hand side, the survey average range number, that shows what the difference was between the minimum and the maximum of the market range. And so again, a position on there that has a 50% range spread, that shows that if you're making the minimum salary in the market, you have 50% salary growth potential, assuming no changes to your range, before you get to the maximum of the range. So again, the same 50% increase, would be possible if somebody was making $50,000 at the minimum. Take 50% of that would be $25,000. So the max of the range would be $75,000. That's how that's calculated there. That just gives you a way to see, is the market a little bit more targeted with a smaller range spread percentage, or is there a wider percentage there? So if you have a 60, 70, 80%, I don't think we went that wide on any positions here. It looks like about 60% was the widest. Again, that would show there's a little bit more room for growth in that position compared to another. Lastly, over on the right-hand side, you see the number of responses, and that shows how many of your peers provided a response or had a matching position for each of those classifications. So many of the positions, 7, 10, 12, up at the top I see a couple at 16, 15. That's showing a very robust response rate on those positions. If you see a position with two matches, 3 matches, et cetera, at the bottom end of the scale, we still display the information, but we do not consider that definitive in setting the market rates there. So if you see a position, again, with 2 responses, I think I see one down on position number 41, that would not be considered a definitive placement. I believe it indicates in the report we typically use 5 responses as our cutoff.
And thank you. And on page 4-5, it says, at the request of the city, Evergreen conducted a review of job descriptions for the position of administrative assistant.
Okay, yes.
When was that request made? And probably you're at a disadvantage because you might not know the timetables on some of this stuff. But
It's part of the RFP.
Okay, yes, I apologize then. So it was in the RFP. We did the actual review, again, later in the fall of last year. We did collect the market information first.
But why are we hand-picking certain positions, and why wouldn't we just have reviewed all the job descriptions?
Because you guys didn't want to pay for it. I mean, that was one position that we were particularly having problem with, and I brought it to you all early on, that was something that I wanted to make sure we looked at. But yeah, we could look at all positions or several positions. In fact, the other piece of that is we use the job descriptions that employees completed back when Austin Peters did their analysis. So we didn't update the job descriptions. We didn't update really looking at any of the positions as you were doing it. We relied on that prior information.
Mm-hmm. So evidently there was multiple drafts given back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I guess it'd just been nice to have been told that versus some of us on the council repeatedly asking the question, where's the report, where's the report? And we always got the narrative, well, we're waiting on Evergreen, we're waiting on Evergreen. So again, it was a little, I think, disingenuous on some of that information that was shared.
Well, I think it would have been, I think it would have been problematic to give you all numerous drafts. I mean, literally, there were things that needed to be changed in those. Some of them typographical errors, some of them informational errors. But that's typically what we do, is we work through that and he gives a final to you. But
Okay.
Well, and as a mayor, I just want to back that up for you, Councilman Spencer, to say that staff is misleading in your earlier comments by not giving you drafts. I don't think that that's the council's place to be reviewing drafts, and we just had your word that you gave us a final report last week, and as soon as we got it, it was sent out. So you say all that, and then you finished by saying that it was beside the point. So, but clearly, in your opinion, it's not. So
And
I just want to stand up and
you
say
have
that
a
I do
difference of
not think
opinion.
it was misleading, or I do believe that when the report came, it was sent to council.
I guess we have a difference of opinion on what type of engagement that elected officials should have when it comes to allocating tax dollars for any program or salaries or benefits, any allocation of tax dollars. So
We do have a difference of opinion, and I believe that staff clearly went through the drafts as they should, and Evergreen gave us the full report last week, correct? A
That's
week
accurate.
ago, correct?
That's correct.
And I'm sure that's fairly typical.
It is typical for there to be drafts and revisions, and as mentioned, many of the changes were minor, but certainly were, needed to be made. And so you're correct, we did, to the best of my knowledge, we shared it immediately upon receipt, and we did not finalize it until, I think, last week, Tuesday.
I think one change we had was the additional money that council approved at budget time. So you needed to change some of that and include that. We wanted to update that.
And I completely agree, but it would have been nice to have a little bit more realistic and fairer assessment of what was actually going on, that there was back and forth of drafts being sent back and forth from Evergreen to administrative staff. That's just not the perception that I received when I continuously asked about the status of the report.
Any other discussion?
I
Councilwoman Ward?
appreciate the process, and I appreciate the final draft. I personally don't want to be reviewing and trying to make a determination on a floating document, so I appreciate the final draft. We couldn't have made any decisions prior to what we're being tasked to do now with drafts. So thank you for presenting your final draft to us. Thank you for staff for working through the multiple drafts and presenting us a final draft that is accurate.
Thank you, and certainly want to not take away from the actual subject matter of what you have presented to us with this kind of beside the point discussion, because we are talking about our employees, which is our biggest asset, and I know that appreciate council giving that such a high priority that they would go through this Evergreen salary presentation and the study. It's extremely important that we go through it basically line by line and each point, because council will have a lot of decision points before us that are going to be very important. So we certainly appreciate it. Councilman Lester?
I think I know the answer, but I noticed you have fire broken out, but you don't have police. It's just
Yeah, after our understanding that police salaries were addressed, the earlier part of the study, we did not put them in the study, the analysis.
that's what I thought.
Councilman Fitzwater?
Yeah. Did I miss it, or do we have this presentation? Do we have the slides for this that we could look at? I know it's all in this report, but that's a really good summary.
We
did
can email that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I sent it over,
Yeah,
it's being projected
Okay.
from
Yeah,
you
that'd
all,
be
so.
helpful. So,
Perfect.
Thank you.
So just as follow-up then, at some point, maybe not tonight, but at some point, council needs to answer the percentile, 50th or above, and then the hybrid, the implementation model, hybrid, and you gave some other options as well, so.
Absolutely. So
Sorry, all of which have cost implications.
They do. Absolutely cost implications throughout. So the hybrid parity is the recommended model that we have proposed. Again, because it does address the market and it also addresses that compression and the internal concern. So that is the model that we're proposing. Again, we have presented two different options for essentially which market position you all would like to align yourselves at. So the 50th percentile would put you right in the middle of the market. It does indicate that half of your peers would be paying more than you are on average, and half would be below. So that is a common market position to look at. But in these tumultuous times, in an environment where you are, and frankly, everybody is experiencing recruitment and retention concerns, if you align yourself in the middle of the market, we don't think you'll be immune to those recruitment and retention concerns that everybody else is experiencing as well. So that was the thought process with the 70th percentile. I know that was something that had been brought forward previously, is would you all like to explore that percentile? And so we do think that percentile would help you. We do think that would put you in a more competitive position, would lessen your recruitment and retention concerns. But of course, certainly we don't think it would eliminate all attrition or all turnover at the organization.
Thank you for that feedback. Any further questions or comments? We appreciate you giving us your recommendation, which may help us to remain competitive in retention, keeping the best employees. So would council have any more specific questions on that? Because we have the recommendation and we have the decision points like were noted in the email that was sent out. And like Mr. Kroll noted, that council will need to work through those decision points, and knowing that there would need to be time to work through and digest the report and not be able to make those decisions necessarily tonight, but making the decision for what direction we want to go. And then as we approach budget time, knowing that vision and direction. Mr. Kroll?
Well, I hope we do something before budget time.
No, correct,
Oh.
correct.
Okay.
No, I mean now, but knowing as we work towards it. No, we thought we didn't think we would have something for tonight. We wouldn't for tonight, of course, but whatever we're doing tonight is going to be impacting our budget and future budgets. Sorry to clarify that. No, correct, now.
And I will just add, that we're happy to support, again, if the direction that you all choose to go. It is a standard part of this process that we would provide support for modeling, for updating the costs, for updating, for a new employee database, if you've had turnover, if you've had new hires. So we would be happy to support you through that process, whichever direction you all decide to go.
We appreciate that. Any further questions? And we anticipate some fairly quick decisions, of course, but we know what our decision points are, so anything further while we have Mark here in front of us?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you for the report.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate your time tonight, and we'll look forward to closing this out with you once we get that direction. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Also, thank you. We have some employees here as well in the room, and we appreciate their interest in this topic, and we'll look forward to some decisions being made soon. And anything else on Evergreen before I move on? Okay. Item 8, announcements by mayor, council, and staff, our 4 standing committees. Councilwoman Wiseman, she's still on there for administration. We can't hear you, but I know that administration is tentatively on, I'm sorry, Councilwoman Ward, our vice chair.
Our next meeting is scheduled for February the 1st. That's a Wednesday morning at 7:30 a.m.
Okay, thank you.
Across the hall.
All right, and finance, Councilman Hensley.
Thank you. Yeah, we will not be having our January meeting this week.
Okay, and public safety.
Yes, Madam Mayor, our next meeting for public safety will be on Thursday, the 26th, 7:30 a.m. in the police training room.
And public works.
Yes, our next meeting will be Thursday, February 9th at 7:30. We set a record this past Thursday, so we're going to try not to exceed that next month.
Wonderful. All right, challenge accepted, right? And for my announcements, I know with the MLK Day yesterday, and there were some local commemorations. Thank you for the prayer, Councilman Spencer. And also, I was out of town for the NAACP's annual breakfast, but I know Councilman Fitzwater was there in my absence, and thank you for attending that. Anything to add on that event?
Well, I would just say Councilman Lester was there, Councilman Spencer, Councilman Deacon, and our city administrator. So we were well represented. It was a great breakfast. I'm sorry?
Chief Wilde.
Yeah, and Chief Wilde who spoke. So it was a great breakfast. Thanks for the opportunity. And I think Councilman stated it well in his prayer. So
Wonderful.
thanks.
Well, appreciate you all attending that event. And any other announcements? All right. Item 11, consent agenda. Well, let me back up on 10. Was there anyone else, any presentations from the gallery on bills? I know we already went over that, and a few people have joined us since then. So any presentations, comments? Okay. Item 11, consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item 12, bills introduced. Number 94.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, amending Chapter 19 Motor Vehicles and Traffic, Schedule O, Parking Time Limit Zones to match existing conditions on East High Street and Lafayette Street.
Mr. Marash.
Thank you. This is basically a issue brought forward by staff to clean up the code in and around High and Lafayette Street, but we're just trying to make conditions in the field match our code, so removing where one cannot park now, things of that nature, removing time restrictions or making them match the signs in the field. And if we have two different codes listed in some cases in different places, we'll match the sign in the field. So went through that with our Transportation and Traffic Commission and recommend approval to the council.
Any questions? All right. Number 95.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, amending Chapter 19 Motor Vehicles and Traffic, Schedule O, Parking Time Limit Zones by the modification of the 600 block of East High Street from 2-hour Section E to 4-hour Section F.
Mr. Marash.
Thank you. Business owner in the 600 block requested to modify the parking time limits in that block, and currently they're 2 hours, and this bill would make them 4 hours. We also, when doing these things, notify other property owners in the area, and we had no opposition to the request. It went through Traffic and Transportation and recommended for approval.
Any questions? Number 96.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, amending Chapter 19 Motor Vehicles and Traffic, Schedule O, Parking Time Limit Zones by deletions next to 1001 West McCarty Street.
Mr. Marash.
Thank you. As clerk indicated, this is removing some parking time limits in the 1000 block of McCarty there by Brook Street. They were imposed in 1987 at a request of a local business there. That business no longer exists, and people in the area were notified that this would be removed, and we had no opposition to that removal. TNT reviewed it and recommended for approval.
Any questions? All right. Number 97.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute an agreement with Automotive Technology in the amount of $69,950 for the demolition of the old bus lift and installation of a new bus lift.
Mr. Marash.
Thank you. As clerk indicated, this is a contract with Automotive Technology. It'll replace our bus lift in central maintenance. It is a grant project through the FTA. We get 80% of that paid for through a grant, approximately $56,000 of the $69,000. And they'll be installing equipment that was already purchased separately.
Any questions? Number 98.
An ordinance amending and enacting regulation regarding marijuana.
Mr. Molman.
Thank you. This bill would amend Chapter 17 and 18 of the City Code to address new regulations regarding marijuana as authorized and required under Amendment 3 to the Missouri Constitution passed back in November 2022. Generally, I put these in 3 different buckets. There's some structural changes to these codes that are necessitated by Amendment 3, just changes in definitions. It's probably the big one, just new terminology that's being used in addition of definitions that are used in the Amendment 3 that need to be also present in our city code. The second bucket is restrictions on personal use and possession of adult use marijuana that's allowed by Amendment 3. So Amendment 3 specifies some areas where local jurisdictions can impose regulations. Generally, they're in the areas of not allowing use in public spaces, prohibiting possession and use by minors, prohibiting sale and distribution to minors, prohibiting operation of motor vehicles and other dangerous activities while under the influence, and prohibiting uses in manners that harms others. And then the last bucket are changes to our business licensing regulations as it relates to a new industry, the adult use marijuana market. And so what we did here is both implemented the regulations that are called out in Amendment 3, and then also modified the medical marijuana provisions and essentially applied them to the adult use sale of marijuana as well. So that way, those regulations are consistent, both for both types of businesses, and in contemplation of a category called out by Amendment 3, called comprehensive facilities that sell both medical marijuana and adult use non-medical marijuana. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on that. There is a change to the small fiscal change under business licensing. The current business license for medical marijuana is $350 annually. So what this bill would do is that it would impose that same $350 business license fee for businesses that are only in the adult use recreational business, but then also establish a $600 annual fee for those businesses that are operating in both realms. So be happy to answer any questions. A lot of information in Amendment 3 and a lot of information that went into this bill. So we're happy to break it down.
Councilman Spencer and then Deacon.
Yeah, I've been, over the past couple of years, sitting on the council, I've received numerous phone calls about residents in apartment units that continually smell the after effects, if you will, of marijuana use. Now, we have been told in the past that, well, since they probably have a medical card that allows them to do that, is there anything changed on the perspective of recreational use in apartment units?
Yeah, so what we did in here is we tried to beef that up a little bit. So we added a provision that specifically says that the odors that are caused by the burning of marijuana constitute a public nuisance when they leave essentially a private area. And so if you're in an apartment and the people next door are using marijuana and it's just smelling up your own apartment, that is a public nuisance, and it is something that would be prohibited under this city code. And so it would be a situation where police, probably not code enforcement, that's a bad match, would be my initial indication, but probably the police, and basically say this is a problem. And so it's not so much, okay, there's marijuana currently under a system, or not currently, but under a system where marijuana in itself is illegal. We go in and say, okay, we take the marijuana and prosecute or whatever it is, arrest. Here it's a situation where, because it's a nuisance type of situation, it's really on the tenants and the property owners to make sure that those nuisances aren't continue to be maintained. And so it's not going to be a situation where the first time anyone's probably going to get in too much trouble. It's going to be a situation where if there are repeated calls, then it becomes a situation where it does enter into the realm of nuisance and can be addressed primarily through the use of fines. That's the mechanism that is set up. So it's not something that we can go in and abate, but we can say, okay, we gave you a warning. You're continuing to maintain a nuisance, and this needs to be addressed one way or another. And so, using some other method that doesn't produce, an odor that leaves the residents, we try to strengthen that because we hear the same thing as well. And someone should be able to be in their own home and not be overwhelmed by any type of odor, whether that be marijuana or anything else. And so hopefully that's a situation where the property owners, the landlords, it would be in their interest to help regulate those types of things and make sure that that their tenants are being equally cared for, and that people can enjoy their homes in a reasonable way. And so enforcement's tough. Enforcement's always tough on nuisance situations, but Amendment 3 seems to set forth that being a particularly not problematic way to address it, because there's some real limitations on cities on how we can regulate the direct possession and use in situations. So this kind of addresses the secondary effects. It's kind of the best way I put it. So this is an attempt to improve on that.
Okay, and is it still only from the recreational side of use, or can that be?
It is both.
It will be both.
What we've
Great.
tried to do is set it up so regardless if you're using it medicinally or recreationally, those secondary effects that you're imposing on your neighbors is what we are regulating, trying to control.
Thank you.
Councilman Deacon?
The $350 fee, is that consistent with liquor stores? Or is this truly a subjective fee? I'm just curious, is that in line with the liquor stores?
So what Sheila, she can give a better.
So most liquor stores have a retail business license, and it depends on what their sales are. But in this case, the $350 is the highest category of retail sales that the city has. So in both instances, for each operating individually, it would be the $350, which is the highest category. If it's a combined business, we're cutting a small break and doing it at $600 for the combination.
But if they lose money, they don't get a prorated fee.
Correct.
All right. So it is a subjective tax. Like we were saying earlier about the 3% vice tax, it seems like we're picking winners and choosers purely over philosophical and or, you debate it yes or no 100 ways, but it just seems like we're picking winners or losers. I'm all for it. We need money. I'd love to get the money in, but I'm just going on what Councilman Hensley said. Is it consistent? Hate to just tax vice. Maybe tax the sex store. Some people are getting killed over that, with diseases and stuff. So,
Councilman Fitzwater?
My question is related to an action we took at the last meeting related to this issue, but my understanding was the county was addressing the sales tax issue today. Do we know what their result was? Because it would be nice to have a consistent tax policy so people don't go outside the city to buy, and our police department has to enforce. Do we know what they did today?
I'm unaware of how that shook out.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Any other
Thank you.
questions?
That's all I
Thank
have.
you. Any other comments from council? All right, number 99.
An ordinance approving a plan for an industrial development project for Scholastic Incorporated, authorizing the city of Jefferson, Missouri to issue its taxable industrial development revenue bonds, Series 2023, in a principal amount not to exceed $44,700,000 to finance the cost of such project, authorizing and approving certain documents, and authorizing certain other actions in connection with the issuance of the bonds.
Mr. Molman?
Thank you. So this bill would approve the issuance of approximately $44 million in taxable industrial revenue development bond, with the purpose being to provide a level of tax abatement on personal property, specifically 50% tax abatement over 10 years. We have representatives from Scholastic here that I see, and also Mr. Holtschneider from the JC Regional Economic Partnership to answer any particular questions. I do note that the City Council did pass a resolution of intent sometime last year in support of this project, for a total project cost of about $30 million. In the meantime, Scholastic has seen fit to increase their investment in the community, additional $14 million. So the total amount that we are seeing on this deal is approximately $44 million of investment here in Jefferson City. So I'd be happy to answer any questions or direct them to our appropriate partners.
Councilman Lester?
So this is not a question, but just a suggestion. It would help me to understand and to explain, I think, to the public, if in our packets we had information, maybe like information that was presented to the commission, tax commission at the time. What's in our packet seems to be all economic and legal and I know I got, I think part of the presentation from Scholastic that they presented, and that was very helpful. And just, I think information from the deliberation when that occurs for where that commission might help us understand and be able to explain to the public better.
Thank you, Councilman Lester. And then I know we have our representatives here from Scholastic too that can also answer any additional questions too, and they would be happy to do so if there's anything further. I know we'll be taking this up at the next meeting, but we appreciate you all being here tonight. Thank you for taking the time to come. Councilman Fitzwater?
But I would just respond that I had the privilege of serving on that group, and it was unanimous support for this project. It was very well laid out by Scholastic. I mean, I think their commitment to our community, and the exciting is that the number is even greater than what was presented, but there was unanimous support from all parties involved. I think it's a good suggestion that, maybe that we can verify that, but it was an exciting project and very well received.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you all for being here as well. We will move on to bills pending, item 13, 2290.
An ordinance amending Chapter 16, Article 3, Section 16-31 of the City Code related to the Commission on Human Relations, structure of commission, quorum, compensation.
Mrs. Strope?
Thank you. So this amends the residency requirements for members of the Human Relations Commission. The current code states that at least 8 of the 9 members of the commission must be residents of the city limits. And this amendment will require at least 7 of the 9 members to be residents of the city. But they must also be residents of Cole County.
Thank you, Mrs. Strope. Is there any council discussion or questions? Councilman Fitzwater?
Mayor? Well, I spoke against this at the administration committee meeting. I still feel very strongly that our boards and commissions need to be represented by city residents. I know that we talked at the last council meeting that we have a number that aren't. I understand that we have some very good people involved in the city, but I just hate to see us continue to expand outside of our city. I think this is a very important committee that ought to be represented by people in our community, and the fact that they can't hit quorums leads me to want to ask other questions, but I just think it's very important that we have city residents participating in these key committees, and I will be a no vote on this proposal.
Thank you. Councilman Deacon?
I concur with Councilman Fitzwater. My concern is that there's a number of committees that does not require full participation, only Jefferson City members. But the most troubling was the Convention and Visitors Bureau. It doesn't require any members from Jefferson City. That's we give them money to promote Jefferson City. I would like to see all of this go back to administration and look at every one of the committees and see, do we want people from the county or do we want people only from the city? Theoretically, somebody could set up a honky-tonk down there in Eugene, it's Cole County, and promote it with all the monies from CVB, and we wouldn't get, I mean, they'd be okay, because they don't have to be from Jefferson City. I think I don't know how it ever got that way. I guess it just got slickered in one at a time, but it was that camel was under the table, under the tent, and I don't want it to go any further. I would like to see, I have a no vote, but I would like to see this go back to, all of this go back to administration and really look at the committees and the commissions.
Councilwoman Wiseman?
Mayor, I'd like to put this on the informal.
Okay, we've had a request to put it on the informal. Any further discussion? Councilman Spencer?
Yeah, at our last council meeting, you stated that anybody on the council could ask for those applicants in relation to the Human Relations Commission. I'd like to see those, so.
You want to see the people who have applied or the people who are
Correct.
members?
No, correct, that who have applied.
Okay, so this has been requested by the bill sponsor to go on the informal. Councilman Lester?
So in placing it on informal, is the intention to discuss it at admin meeting, or is there an intention? No.
Councilwoman Wiseman?
Hopefully to take it up at a later date,
Okay, so
or
it is,
not, depending on how we feel.
all right, so as of now, it is on the informal. And item, well, and I should clarify that why I brought it up, I do want to clarify that it was not necessarily because of quorum issues, but that Human Relations Commission, just by nature of its task, is a broad and diverse commission, and that I felt that it would be the advantage to at least have the option if needed. Doesn't mean that we have to, but that it could be utilized if needed, depending on who is available to serve, similar to what some of our commissions already have, such as the Arts Commission already has too. So just to clarify, what I was doing was nothing out of the ordinary at all that hasn't already been done for years. Thank you. And now to 91.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, accepting and approving the final subdivision plat of Emily Lane Subdivision, Section 3, a subdivision of the City of Jefferson, Missouri.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This bill was forwarded by the Planning and Zoning Commission. It pertains to a 3.4 acre tract of property located at the end of Emily Lane, as shown up on the screen. This property was voluntarily annexed into the city in October of last year. At that time, a zoning of RA1, multifamily residential, was applied to the property. The RA1 district permits multifamily buildings up to 4 units per building, and multiple buildings can be placed on a single lot. Here's an aerial photo of the property. As you can see, it's located at the end of Emily Lane, which dead ends at the property. This bill would approve a final subdivision plat, subdividing that property into 3 lots, and shows a cul-de-sac bulb that would be constructed at the end of Emily Lane. The developer has submitted a development plan for the property, along with the preliminary plat that was approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission. That plan up on the screen shows 2 3-unit buildings per lot, and so a total of 6 triplexes constructed on the property. The developer wouldn't necessarily be tied to that plan, but it is useful in showing what their intent is. This item was recommended for approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission at their December 8th meeting on a vote of 8-0, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or discussion? Roll call, please.
Fitzwater.
Aye.
Hensley.
Aye.
Kimna.
Aye.
Lester.
Aye.
Schreiber.
Aye.
Spencer.
Aye.
Spicer. Ward.
Aye.
Wiseman.
Aye.
Deacon.
Aye.
Bill passes. 2292.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute an agreement with Bartlett and West in the amount of $190,500 for the conceptual design of the High Street Viaduct.
Mr. Marash?
Thank you. The clerk indicated it pretty well, but this is a contract with Bartlett and West, and this is a city-county shared sales tax fund project, and again, performing preliminary design for the High Street Viaduct.
Any discussion? Councilman Spencer?
Yeah, Matt, do you have a timeline of how long a process is going to take?
Yeah, I think the contract is indicating midsummer, I believe. I wrote that down somewhere. I think it was July or August, something like that.
Thank you.
Councilman Schreiber? Okay. Wonderful. Any other questions or discussion? Roll call, please.
Hensley.
Aye.
Kimna.
Aye.
Lester.
Aye.
Schreiber.
Aye.
Spencer.
Aye.
Spicer. Ward.
Aye.
Wiseman.
Aye.
Deacon. Fitzwater.
Aye.
Bill passes. Nothing on the informal. Resolution 2240.
A resolution authorizing the City of Jefferson to apply for Transportation Alternatives Program grant.
Mr. Marash?
Thank you. This particular grant is a TAP grant that's administered through MoDOT. And to apply, we have to get the governing body's approval, and that's what this resolution would do. But basically, the project would be to construct a greenway from St. Louis Road over to Riverside Park. This is essentially a parks project, and that would be applying for up to the $500,000 maximum on this project. That would put the 20% at $125,000. We believe the project probably would cost slightly more than that, around $700,000. With preliminary numbers at this point. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
I would just like to make one comment first. I would like to thank the Vetter family. Louis Vetter made it possible. He had that strip of land, and he was wanting to make that available to the city to get to the park. So thank you, Louis, even though you're not with us anymore. Thanks, Guy.
Thank you, Councilman Deacon. So we have a motion and second. Did you get those, Emily?
I did not.
Okay. Councilman Kimna and Schreiber. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Kimna,
Aye.
Lester,
Aye.
Schreiber, Spencer,
Aye.
Spicer, Ward,
Aye.
Wiseman,
Aye.
Deacon,
Aye.
Fitzwater,
Aye.
Hensley.
Aye.
Resolution passes. 2241.
A resolution authorizing the City of Jefferson to apply for Transportation Alternatives Program grant.
Mr. Marash?
Thank you. This project, where we would try to utilize this grant, is at Stadium Boulevard, basically from the JCMG area up to Linwood. And the grant would actually cover the pedestrian accommodations in that area, but the project really is we're contemplating it being a city-county sales tax project. And one of the drivers behind it was flooding in that area at Satinwood and Stadium. It's flooded a number of times over the years. And so a big part of this project would be to add additional capacity through that intersection. So once it's torn up, we anticipate going back with a roundabout on top of that. But this grant would help us stretch our dollars further there.
Any questions or a motion to approve?
Second.
Any further discussion on the resolution? Roll call, please.
Lester,
Aye.
Schreiber, Spencer,
Aye.
Spicer, Ward,
Aye.
Wiseman,
Aye.
Deacon,
Aye.
Fitzwater,
Aye.
Hensley,
Aye.
Kimna.
Aye.
Resolution passes. Item 16, we've covered presentations. Item 17, any council and staff discussion of presentation topics. Item 18, any new business. 19, approval of the January 3rd, 2023 closed session minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Schreiber, Spencer,
Aye.
Spicer, Ward,
Aye.
Wiseman, Deacon,
Aye.
Fitzwater,
Aye.
Hensley,
Aye.
Kimna,
Aye.
Lester.
Aye.
Motion passes. Item 20, closed session. Pursuant to Section 610.021 of the revised statutes of Missouri, the chair will entertain a motion to go into closed session to discuss the following. Item 1, attorney-client privilege, Section 610.0211, real estate, Section 610.0212, and Item 3, sealed proposals and negotiated contracts, 610.02112. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Spencer,
Aye.
Spicer, Ward,
Aye.
Wiseman,
Aye.
Deacon,
Aye.
Fitzwater,
Aye.
Hensley,
Aye.
Kimna,
Aye.
Lester,
Aye.
Schreiber.
Okay, we will go into closed session here in this room in about 5 minutes. So we would probably ask even those who are involved in the closed session maybe to step out in the hall, and we would call everybody in when it's time. So